Welcome back to Curious Now from the Center for Medical Simulation. I'm Jenny Rudolph, an organizational behavior scholar interested in everything to do with, this week, how we listen and how we ask questions, what makes that hard, what makes that inviting and rewarding. And I'm back with Esmira Yusufova, Lucas Ferris, and Julie Hartman, who joined us last week to talk about listening. And this week, we're going to be talking about why real questions can feel risky. And in episode 22 of Curious Now, I put out the idea that often it's tough for us to ask real open-ended questions that we don't know the answers to because it involves a couple things. It involves more mutuality, more improvisation, and less control. It involves the feeling that I don't know the answer. And for many of us, I'll just out myself on that, having grown up as a child of two academics, knowing the answer was highly valued. So for me to ask a question that I don't know the answer to is a little risky, and I have to really push myself sometimes. So Esmira, Lucas, Julie, I'd love to hear how this practice was for you, what it's like when you ask real open-ended questions. What have been the rewards? What have been the struggles?
Hi, my name is Esmira. I am the chair of the mindfulness group at SSH. I'm a simulationist and a holistic nurse with a mindfulness practice. For me, asking real questions has been a challenge for many years because just like Dr. Rudolph, I felt like I always had to know the answers. If I'm lecturing on a topic, I have to be well versed, and saying I don't know was extremely challenging for many years until I realized if I knew everything, then what's the point of living and learning? And so once I embraced that type of mindset, I start saying to my students bluntly, I don't know. I've never heard of it. Let's look it up. I'll look at it. I'll read about it a little more and I'll let you know. And it's been rewarding. It's been rewarding because then people realize you're real. You're not lying to them. You're not making answers up on the fly, and you actually care. And I get back to them. If I say I will look into it, I definitely look into it and I respond back. So from my personal experience, saying I don't know has been rewarding, especially with my interactions with the learners.
And for me, I'm Lucas Ferris. I currently work as the Simulation Operations and Education Manager. Thank you again, Dr. Rudolph, for having us back this week. Very much appreciated it. So for me, to address your question, whenever I'm in a debrief or I'm working with a team, it's helpful to know the answers, but it is challenging because if I'm the facilitator, my role is to facilitate discussion. And if I already know everything that we're going to talk about, then sure, I could guide them down one path, but is that really what they need to know? And are they getting the maximum benefit of our time together? And as an educator, do I limit the conversation by only giving them what I think they need to know? How do I allow myself that growth as well? So I think from an educator's perspective, we should have lifelong learning. And in the debriefing time, every learner and every facilitator is different, and that's beautiful. And so we should be able to take that as it is and facilitate a group discussion and tailored to the needs of every individual so they can all be successful.
And I'm Julie Hartman. I'm the operations director at the University of Iowa for our simulation center there. And Lucas, one of the things that you said about the opportunity to grow just reminded me of how much my life has changed since becoming involved with simulation and learning about different styles of asking questions. I started in simulation in 2017. And one of my favorite things is telling someone out loud when I'm asking the question, because it's a cue to me as well, saying, I'm genuinely curious about this. Tell me more about this. And I didn't really think it was that monumental until I started hearing my kids say it back to me. When they're at home, they're like, I'm genuinely curious about this, Mom. Please tell me more. And I'm like, oh, that's so great to hear. I love that I've said it enough that it's worn off on you now. But I think it's just a good sort of signpost to people that says, I don't know. And I really value your opinion. I want to hear what you have to say.
Julie, I wonder if you might have an example of something you heard back or the kind of things that you hear back and how that impacts you when you hear those answers.
Yeah. So I like to say that I'm genuinely curious to train myself when I get to a moment where I'm thinking, what the heck were you thinking? Like, I cannot fathom why you would do that. And I'm so curious to know why. I feel like it gives me a chance to have less judgment. And I especially have used it in situations with simulation where somebody does something completely off script from what I ever imagined they would do. And instead of, saying, what the heck, or I would never do that, like, I'm really curious. I want to know more about this. So after doing simulation for a while, there are patterns that you see, especially if you're running the same simulation multiple times. You start to expect things. And when you don't expect what happened, it can definitely throw you off.
Mm. So I'm very fascinated to hear essentially a reset strategy. I think that's how I might label it, Julie, when and I'll invoke Susan Eller's idea of WTF to WTF. Susan taught me when I'm thinking, what the F? I should flip that to what's their frame.
Yes.
And you're doing something very similar there. So I didn't anticipate that, though I certainly value it and understand that. And when you are successful at asking those questions, I'm very curious to know myself, what's made that so rewarding for you? What do you hear back that keeps you doing it? What kinds of things happen when you do that that makes it so rewarding?
I want to say almost every single time, here's something that was something I never thought of. And it seems to make sense. And I really just appreciate that so much because people have all different types of perspectives on things. I have a very different healthcare background than most of my learners that I work with now. And so there are things that I would immediately think of that would never cross their minds. And same thing, first thing might be on their list that was never going to come up on my list of differentials ever. And so I find it rewarding because I think it gives me personally that light bulb moment where I'm like, oh, I understand you now. And I hope that it helps to extend some grace to people who maybe were feeling a little self-conscious. Ooh, why did I do that? Ooh, I didn't know that was different. I've seen people kind of melt and retract into their shells when they get asked questions about why they're doing things that way. Again, I especially notice it in my kids when they're like, ooh, are you asking about this because I'm going to get in trouble? I'm like, no, there's no blame. There's no judgment. I just really want to know.
Mm-hmm. When I first started learning about debriefing and trying to create a process that would work for me, I came upon Robert Keegan's work. He's a professor and educator at the Harvard School of Education, I think retired now. But he talked about learners as either he talked about our relationship with learners. Do we see them as doers of incorrect or correct actions, or do we see them as meaning makers? And I think the profound move that you're suggesting, Julie, when we ask real questions, we treat people as meaning makers, and the actions that they take that either might be quote unquote correct or might be incorrect are usually driven by very interesting and unexpected concerns, interests, goals that we can't possibly know till we ask. And for me, that moment of excitement that you're sort of describing when they answer in a way that you didn't expect is so valuable. So we are coming up on the end of our time together here, and I'd just like to think a little bit about a readiness goal for us and possibly a new workout of the week. In episode 22, we asked people to just take the risk or have the joy of asking a true open-ended question. And I'm wondering if you have any other ideas or new ideas about what we could focus on, what each one of you might want to focus on regarding open-ended questions.
Part of the NLA Lead program, whenever I was completing that in last year, one of the program directors named Dr. Janice Brewington, she used this phrase that really helped me whenever I would make a mistake or misspoke or wasn't as confident in my responses, and it's called the rewind. And I feel like that's something that no matter where you're at, what you're doing, what context you're in, that word vomit is going to come out, or something isn't going to come out exactly the way that you planned, and that's okay. What's important is that we reframe ourselves, and so for me, verbally saying rewind is helpful. Others may need to internalize that and think about it, but for me, I just would go, okay, rewind, let's try that again. And it was a good mental reset. So I feel like when asking those difficult questions, it opens the field for transparency from our learners and those that we're working in the debriefing setting with. And I wonder if that may be a reason that they aren't as honest in their responses, or they feel less secure in that space, even so. So providing an opportunity up front for a rewind and letting them know that that's an option, I think sets the tone, because students are in their area with their peers, and they want to make sure that they're reflecting appropriately, and that there's what they say in debriefing is, as we know, it should be confidential, but those learners may also be thinking and taking in what their peers are saying. So I think giving the opportunity for a rewind and reframing of a reflection would be beneficial to any scenario.
So if I were to try to translate this into a readiness goal for us, facilitators or people interacting with others, we're going to try to de-risk a little bit the answering process of the open-ended question. So the readiness goal might be ready to offer an opportunity for a rewind when you ask a difficult open-ended question or something. And our workout of the week could be when you ask a difficult open-ended question, or before you do, you can kind of almost pre-brief and say, hey guys, I've got a tough question, or I've got an open-ended question, or I'm really curious to know, and I realize sometimes these questions can be a little tricky to answer. So I just want you to feel free to rewind if you're not happy with your answer. But Lucas, am I headed in the direction you were thinking?
Yes, ma'am, that is absolutely correct.
All right. And practicing that ourselves, our workout of the week is going to be practice offering a rewind when you ask an open-ended question. So, Esmira, Lucas, Julie, I want to thank you so much for coming on as listeners to the podcast Curious Now. It's really fun. I think you've been able to see in my face how much I've been enjoying our conversation and your experiences and your wisdom. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It
Thank
was a
you.
pleasure.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Curious Now from the Center for Medical Simulation in Boston. Curious Now is produced by James Lipshaw. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, feel free to consider our personal leadership coaching service with me, or consider signing up for our Simulation Leadership Intensive in August 2026.